Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad so many people made it this early in the morning. I guess you left the party early just to be here for the talk, right? Okay. So my name is Cketti. I know that's not a real name, but I go by that. It's a bit like Madonna, no last name. It's always fun in queues at conferences, sorted by last name. Okay, so the title of the talk is Frustration-Free Orientation Changes. And if you haven't read the abstract on the website, the frustration-free is the user experience, not the developer experience. So if you thought, oh no, everything will be super easy for me as a developer, I'm very sorry. No. Right, the goal is to have a frustration-free experience for the user. And this is a very basic thing, but I've seen beginners struggle with how to deal with orientation changes in a way that doesn't break the app or introduce subtle bugs that only appear later. So this whole talk won't be about orientation changes itself. We will just use it as an entry point to find out why Android development is harder than, say, desktop development. And we will see why all of that is during the talk. So, what am I talking about when I mean that orientation changes can be frustrating for the user? So, imagine you have this screen and you can't really read it, right? It's a search view on top. It's an app that displays treats, and you like to search for tasty treats. So you get nice results like gingerbread, honeycomb, ice cream sandwich, and the like. And now you rotate the device, and you might end up with something like this, which is the search term at the top is retained, but all of the screen is empty. The search results again. Super frustrating for the user, right? Because now they have to start the search again to get the results. There are various variations of this. So another option is that everything is gone, including your search term, which I guess is not that much of a problem if it's just tasty, but say you're in a foreign country, maybe France, and you have to enter a street name that you can't pronounce or spell, and you carefully type it from some piece of paper. You rotate the device, it's gone. That's super frustrating. I don't know what I'm talking about. So this is better. The thing that happened here is that on the left, our starting screen, the user scrolled down, but on the right, you end up at the top of the list. Again, not a huge problem if the list is rather short, but if you have like 1,000 elements and you scroll near the bottom, it's super annoying to go there again. So what we really want is this. You rotate the device, every information is retained, the scroll position is the same, and you notice that the user is not particularly happy about that, right? We just want to avoid frustration. This is how it should work. It's not like, ooh, the app is doing what I want. It's like, this is the goal. So it's not the goal to delight the user, but to not frustrate them. All right, so I guess all of you know why we have these problems, or the reason why the state is lost. When the device is rotated, the default behavior is that the activity is destroyed and then recreated. And if you don't take special care, some or all of your state might be lost, which leads to the frustration. And we can look at various ways how to make it less frustrating for the user. Sadly, it is quite frustrating for developers. So there are several ways to deal with activity restarts. And when I talk to some other developers that I'm giving this talk, the answer was always, just fix the screen to portrait and you're fine, which I hope all of them were joking, but I know some are not because they have stupid time constraints, so they sometimes go with that. But who likes apps that are fixed to one orientation? it's super audience participation, right? You don't have to raise your hand because you agree. For the record, it was nobody. So what can we do? The next thing many people do, and I actually believe it's a good option, is handle orientation changes themselves. So you do this by going to Android manifest, add the config changes attribute. And if you're not an Android developer that has been there from the beginning, you have to use orientation and screen size. In the early day, just orientation was enough, but with API 13, you also have to add the screen size attribute. This was super frustrating because when I was working on this talk, I was just using orientation because this is how it used to be in the old days when I still used that method, but it no longer worked, and I actually had to search the internet for the right solution. I'm telling you, you don't have to remember that. Please don't do it if you can avoid it. But there's a second part. So this is in the manifest, and in the activity itself, you get the on configuration change callback with a new configuration object that then contains information what orientation you're in. If you have, if you want to display a different layout or a different screen to the user, depending on which orientation it is, you have to do it manually here if you handle the configuration changes. So that's also kind of the reason why the default behavior is that the activities are destroyed and recreated, because when they are recreated, you could have a different layout in the layout land folder, for example. So you can use the orientation qualifier in your layouts, and the system basically does the right thing. So you have one layout for portrait, one layout for landscape, and you don't really care which orientation you're in, because the system will pick the right layout for you. If you handle it manually, you have to do all the work manually. And I didn't know that, but when I was doing screenshots for the presentation, the action bar actually has different heights in portrait and landscape. So if you use that one, you either have to manually change the height, which I guess is super annoying, or you get different action bar sizes depending on which orientation you started, which I guess is also not a super nice user experience. So like I said, this is just one method, and I've seen so many pull requests for my open source project where people try to fix a bug using that way. Please don't. Right, so you notice that it's not something with orientation changes in the manifest, it's called config changes, the attribute. And that's the reason for that is that it's part of a larger group of changes, configuration changes that trigger a restart of the activity. There are a couple of other, like if you change the system language, your activity usually also gets restarted. The reason for that is that then you can use the localized strings in the new language, and you don't have to manually go, oh, okay, I have a button here, I have to change the text there, stuff like that. So locale is the thing for the language. There are a couple of other things. So manually handling configuration changes for all of them is like a lot of work. Some of them you can just ignore. You probably don't want to change your UI or anything about your app if you move from one mobile network to another. But yeah, things like changing the language, that massively impacts your UI, and you don't really want to do it manually. Okay, so another thing you can do is let the system do the activity recreation, so destroy the old activity, start a new activity, but retain an object. And in this case, object is just a Java object, or since I'm using Kotlin on my slides, a Kotlin object. Right, there are a couple of methods that were added over the years. In the beginning, we only had this, a callback in activity called onRetain non-configuration instance. Super short, super easy to remember. So this one gets called by the system when the activity is about to be destroyed. You can just return any object where you save the state that is important to your activity. And when the new activity is created, you can call get last non-configuration basically anytime. You would usually do it in onCreate, I guess. And you will get that object. So the framework is holding on to that object for you and hands it back to you when the activity is recreated, which is cool. I guess many of you are using AppCombat or the support library and not activity directly. And you might have noticed that you can't use this method there. But of course, they added something to the name, and now it's even better. You get on-retain custom non-configuration instance, and consequently get last non-configuration instance. Basically does the same just for fragment activity and subclasses like AppCombat activity. Then I think in Cketti 11 loaders were introduced, which would work good in our example of searching for tasty treats. So you could use the loader to search for treats, and then the loader itself would hold on to the search result, and the Android framework is holding on to the loader for us. And when the activity is recreated, we reconnect to the loader and get the search results back so we can display them immediately without having to actually search for them again. The thing that was also introduced in 11, I think, was fragments and set retain instance. That's a fragment that shouldn't have any UI elements. It's just a shell where you can put your objects in, all the state you want to save, put in there. And again, the framework will hold on to it for you. You will get a reference to it back in the new activity, and that way your state survives. For some reason, it's the preferred method of Google. So if you read the documentation for on-retain non-configuration instance, they will point you to this method. I never warmed up to it, but basically it doesn't matter which method you use. In recent days, the Android architecture components is a bigger initiative, and the thing you can use there is ViewModel, which is super nice. I will link to some other talks. So there has been a talk yesterday that introduced architecture components, especially ViewModel, live data, and the like. There will be a workshop later today, so I can recommend that. All of them have one thing in common. You can retain an object during configuration changes, and you would save your state there. Like in our example, the search term and the list of results. Okay, so are we done? We can either handle configuration changes manually, or we retain an object. That should be enough, right? And it kind of is for orientation changes, but you know, since we're just 10 minutes into the presentation, you guess the answer is no, because there's this guy. So Android is super nice in that you can start as many apps as you like, and you don't have to manually quit an app to make room in memory for new apps. It just happens automatically. But of course, not all apps fit in a memory. So what Android does is just, okay, user hasn't looked at this process or app for a while, we just kill it. And of course, just killing stuff is not good user experience, because if you return to it, all your state is gone. So it's a bit more clever than that. We're not just killing processes. They are given a chance before to save the state. And we will look into all of that in a moment. Right, as I mentioned, saving state. You probably have all seen this method. OnSave instance state is called by the framework when there's a chance that your app is going to be killed. That is if it goes to the background, so you have an activity open and you press, for example, the home button or the recent buttons and move to another app. Basically, your app moves to the background, and after that, it could be killed. Another situation is, of course, orientation changes. Because why not use the same mechanism for that too, right? So you get an opportunity to save your state there, and then when the activity is recreated, you get the saved state back. That is another method you can use for orientation changes, but it's a method you have to use if you want to handle process that like it should. And the example here is super simple. So imagine there's a UI with a button where you can toggle the visibility of a view for some additional information or something like that. You would just save the state of the view that you toggle. Limitations, right? You saw you get a bundle handed in and you save some data on there. You can't save very much data in. And in the example from the beginning where you have search results, that's a good example of stuff you shouldn't save into a bundle. We'll get into what should be saved where in a bit. But basically, there's a limit and it's not very well documented on how much it really is. But think about if your data exceeds 100 kilobytes, it's already too much. You can save more data. It's about 1 megabyte, and it depends on a couple of things, but you should never go near this limit. A, because it has to be retained in system memory, so everything you save here, basically other apps miss in RAM. And it takes a while to serialize and deserialize the data to send it to the system process. So the less data it is, the faster your app is being restored. Right, restoring the state, there are basically two options. One is you get a callback by the system that hands you in the bundle where you save the data in, and you just restore the data. In this super simple example, it's just you set the visibility of the view to whatever you saved. The other option to restore state is to do it in onCreate. You might have noticed there's this parameter, saved instance state, and this can be null. So if you first started activity, there's no saved state, so it will be null. But if you're being restored, for example, after an orientation change, it will have a value and it will contain the bundle that was saved or populated in unsaved instance state. Right, so luckily you don't have to do all the work by yourself. The platform widgets already save data that the user can enter basically. So if you have an added text, the text that the user inputted will be saved. If you have a checkbox, the checkbox state will be saved. Things like that. Things that can only be changed programmatically, like the visibility of a view, is not automatically saved. So if you do stuff like that, you have to save that state manually. Unfortunately, it's not super well documented which widget saves what state. The best documentation is the source, which on Android, fortunately, we can look at. But yeah, the guideline is things that the user can enter in the UI itself are saved, and the rest is up to you. Other things that are saved are the activity stack and the fragment stack. So you don't have to remember which activities you started to start them again after process death or something like that. The system takes care of that and recreates the activities and fragments as needed after process death. All right. So now what state should you save? I was talking about this a little bit, so we know what is saved, so everything else needs to be saved, but the question is where. Since the bundle is limited, we don't want to put everything in there. Super hand-wavy answer, as much as needed, but no more. here I'm only talking about the bundle. So user input that's not saved manually is stuff that you can't get anywhere else because the user should only do it once. If they have to do it more than once, they are frustrated. So save all user input. And if you're displaying some data that comes from somewhere else, you don't have to store that in the bundle. You would just save a reference to where you get it from. In our first example, we have a list of trees in our database or wherever, and we would just remove the search term, and then we know we have a list of all the stuff. We just have to combine the search term and that list, and we get the search results. So after process that, you would just do the search again and then display the results. Right, so external data sources, database, could be URI, or just a file. Right. So this makes our life as developer already quite complex, right? So yeah, maybe I shouldn't call the audience who's super confident all of their activities survive process that. But yeah, let's have a look at the consequences. Who has seen this stack trace before? Okay, so people were shy in the beginning, but then almost all hands went up. This happens when you try to do fragment transaction at the wrong time, basically. And we will see in a minute what the wrong time is. And now already you should have a better idea of why that is, but I will explain it in more detail in a bit. So, I'm not sure if you can read it. So the idea is you have an activity instance here. At this point, the state is saved because the screen is rotated. But before that, the user kicked off a background operation. Press a button, and you have to do something in the background before you can show a result to the user. And it used a super naive approach, so it was just holding on to the activity instance and tries to do something here. In our case, a fragment transaction. Imagine you did some loading operation and then you display a dialog because you want to ask the user something. But at this point, the state has already been saved, and if the fragment manager would let you do the transaction, it would basically be lost because that state is used when the activity is recreated. So you get an exception to let you know that you did something wrong. In recent support library versions, the commit allowing stateless method was introduced. How many of you use that to fix bugs? Okay, yeah, it's a mean question because you kind of have to admit a mistake, but some people did it anyways. Thank you for that. I did that too, but mainly because I was okay. Let's not crash the app. It's not ideal, but we'll fix the problem properly later. Yeah, it's unfortunate. So what you do is just do the fragment transaction, but it basically never shows up for the user because here the state where the dialog or whatever just isn't shown. It's recreated. And here you can also see why approaches that don't modify the UI but have the UI listen to changes in the model, for example, work better. Here we directly modify the UI, and basically we modify the wrong activity instance. If you do stuff like that, you also cause for the activity object to be not eligible for garbage collection longer than necessary. So all this orientation and config changes causes quite a bit of trouble. And I'm sorry that I don't have a solution for that. Over the years, super many people have worked on that, and as a community, we're not yet sure what our preferred solution is, which is okay, I guess. Just use what works for you, but I guess Android architecture components or some of the other solutions that exist out there come like years too late, because in the beginning we all had to struggle with this and everyone came up with their own solution for that. Right, I alluded to that. If you do something in the background, don't hold on to an activity instance or something that has a reference to an activity instance, because that will basically prevent the activity that is going to be destroyed from being able to garbage collect it. And you usually want to hold on to it because you want to modify the UI later, which doesn't work if the activity was already recreated. So you're basically trying to modify an activity that is no longer displayed to the user. In the best case, nothing happens. Your UI change is just lost. In the worst case, like in fragment transactions, you will get an exception and your app crashes. All right. Yeah, so that's just an example. So inner classes have an implicit reference to the activity, and views have a reference to the activity. So don't hold on to any of these. Okay. Now this is kind of a special case. It's just an example. This can happen with much more situations, but let's go through this one example to see why handling recovery from process death is super annoying and a lot of work to get right. And this is a really simple example. Imagine you have an activity where you can edit user settings. So the user object itself lives somewhere, I don't know, in the cloud or in the database, so you have to load it first, and of course you do it in the background because you don't want to block the main, right? Then let's say the user presses an change avatar button. You don't want to do it yourself, so you call start activity result to allow the user to pick an image from the gallery or something like that. So imagine this is a different process. The user selects a new image, gets on activity result in the first activity, and then it just goes ahead and says, okay, I'm updating my user object, I write something to the database, doesn't network call, doesn't really matter. And of course you, again, do it in the background because you don't want to block the main thread. Now, same situation, but during the start of the gallery app to pick an image, our process gets killed because gallery app is crappy software and needs super much memory or something like that. So, status saved here of our activity. The image picker runs as it should. You select an image, go back, and as soon as you go back, the system realizes, oh, I killed that process, but it should be displayed in the foreground now, so I have to recreate it. So you get your state handed back in, the saved state, but as I mentioned, a user object is not something that should go into the bundle because you already have it in the database or somewhere else. So you would just save a user ID and then have to basically, during the start of the activity, kick off loading of the user object again. In the meantime, on activity results gets called when the activity has been created. But if you kick off the update user object operation right there, the user object won't be loaded yet. So if that code basically assumes the user object is already there in memory, you will get a null pointer exception. And this is a super simple example. You can imagine a multi-process step where you have lots of user interaction. Basically, every time you show a dialog and you wait for the user to press a button or something like that, so you basically waiting for user input. The user could switch to another app, which causes your app now being in the background, being killed, and you don't want to make the user start over the process when they go back to your app. It gets even more complicated if you're showing dialogues, because you will probably use dialogue fragments. And as I mentioned, the fragment stack is restored. So even if you wanted the user to start over at the beginning, you basically then have to clean up all the stuff that is saved automatically for you. Android is fun, isn't it? All right, so now we roughly know why everything is complicated, and let's assume you're using one of the solutions that help you with that problem. You still have to do a lot of it manually. How do you test this stuff? Because usually you can't influence when a process is killed. You can kill processes manually, in the recent screen, swiping them out, but then all of the saved state is also discarded, which you don't want in testing, because you want to see how your app reacts to just being handed the saved state, if it recovers correctly. Right, so I don't have really any solutions for automatic testing, so manual testing. The simplest thing you can do is rotate the device. So this is the minimum thing your app should do. And if you use one of the methods to retain an object, you're not testing much. But like I said, that's the easy case. That should work 100%, which in many apps it doesn't, which is super sad. So rotating the device is step one. Also, if some of you is doing QA, that's probably the first thing you should do when you get an app to test. Just rotate the device after entering some data. Another thing you can do is change the system language to see if all of the text in your app change according to the new system language. Of course, that only makes sense if your app actually supports more than one language. You can change the font size in Android. And hopefully your app uses the relative font sizes, SP. So all the text should adjust, and all the state should be retained. Hopefully you also test this anyway, regardless of configuration changes, to make sure that all your text is still visible in the UI, and you don't assume, oh, my Pixel device has this default font size, that should work fine everywhere. Change the display size again, that's also a configuration change, and your app will be restarted. There's a fun developer settings options that for some reason a lot of users have enabled. I talked to one person, and they were thinking that kind of optimizes their Android because it keeps the memory clean or something like that. And I think they were also using it for privacy reasons, right? Because if I don't use the activity, just clean it up so nobody can use the data. I don't know. So what Don't Keep Activities does is, as soon as your activity is not visible on the screen anymore, the activity instance is destroyed. Before that, the state is saved. So you can use that to kind of simulate process death. It's not the same thing because your process isn't killed, just the activity is destroyed. If you use any of the methods to retain an object that I introduced, they are basically coupled to the capability of the activity. Those will be destroyed as well. If you use any other method to retain objects, like a singleton or a static field somewhere, so you do it yourself, this probably won't have much effect. The activity will still be killed, but the state you save yourself somewhere else will be retained. The hardcore way to test process death is to change the background process limit to 0. That will kill every app that doesn't show UI in the foreground at the moment. If you have that enabled, you and you use the phone for anything else than debugging, you definitely shouldn't forget to disable this. Otherwise, all your app are constantly killed, which is not nice to the battery. These are about the manual testing methods. It's a lot you can do. I wasn't able to find out if you can just kill an app using ADB with it triggering the state saving mechanism. If anyone knows, I'd love to know as well. And that's almost it. So if you only take one thing away from this talk is always save state. Is really, if you don't do it, it's cheating, and you will get away with it most of the time because there's an easy way to just make orientation changes work. But Android apps are actually killed, and it might not be a huge problem when you're developing because most of the time your app will be in the foreground and Android wouldn't dare to touch it. Also, if you use a high-end device for testing, the likelihood that the process you're looking at or that you're testing is being killed is super low. But in the wild, this basically happens all the time. So you should handle process that. The methods to retain an object are all super good. Use that. You don't want the user to have to wait. So in our super simple example, we're doing a search. Imagine we have a super bad implementation. It takes a second to load the results. It's fine to wait the first time the user pressed the search button, but if you rotate the device, you don't want to repeat the search and make the user wait another second or even more for that result. So retain that in memory because the results will be there right away. And don't update the UI when you're not supposed to. I mentioned that the Android team made a decision to make you hard crash on fragment transactions to let you know that it's wrong. Most of the time, if you just update a text view, something like that, in an activity that is no longer being displayed and was destroyed, just nothing happens. So you might be doing this more often than you realize. And users might not even report those bugs anymore. Like, hey, I pressed this button and I rotated the device and what was supposed to happen didn't happen. They would just press the button again. But yeah, maybe go through your code and make sure you don't do that. Did I put it here? Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the architecture components. You can use viewModel for retaining an object, and you can use live data basically to make the UI listen to changes instead of modifying the UI directly from your background or when your background process is done, whatever. That way, always the correct activity will be updated. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. So we do have some minutes for questions, right?
Sure.
I'm not sure if you want to do it here. So my suggestion is that we can go outside if you have any questions or suggestions to talk about this, to leave the room for the next speaker.
Actually, we have plenty of time now, so we can stay
Okay,
here.
so they have to fill their film roll with material. So any volunteers for the big audience? You will be on video. All right, so if you reconsider, I will be right outside. Thank you again.